We celebrate the continuity of office, the legacy of the past.
Will she change the direction of an activist court? First the general, now the chief. Chief Justice Deborah Poritz in her first TV interview since her swearing in. She's making history on the court, and she's on the docket for this special edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.
After 9 months on the job, she's still the new Chief Justice. And the whole state's still watching to see what kind of chief she'll be. But on this special edition of Due Process, we'll get some clues from Deborah Poritz herself. Her first TV interview since she took the oath of office last summer. It's what's on the docket for this special Due Process. But first, here's Sandra King to trace the Poritz path to power.
And Raymond, it is a path not taken by those who came before her. What other Chief Justice took law as a second career? But then what other Chief Justice was a woman? She is, of course, the first, but for Deborah Poritz, that's familiar ground. She was the first female Attorney General, too. She knows that means a special kind of public scrutiny, especially since New Jersey's chief may be the most powerful anywhere in this country. And the governor who named her knows it, too. Christie Whitman, of course, was herself a first.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we will see history made. In a few moments, when Justice Coleman administers the oath of office to the new Chief Justice, I urge you to listen very carefully. The soft sounds you hear in the background will be yet another glass ceiling being broken.
And with that, Deborah Poritz of Princeton, a mother of two who was 40 years old before she even became a lawyer, became New Jersey's most important attorney, its most powerful judge, Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court.
I will do my best to live up to the high standards of those who have come before me.
It was a standard set by the likes of Richard Hughes, and for the last 17 years by the controversial Robert Wilentz. Activist was the word most often used for them, and for virtually all the Chief Justices of the modern era.
It's been an activist court, and from Vanderbilt, Weintraub, Hughes, Wilentz.
But with Deborah Poritz, the state's highest court may have gotten something new. Not just its first woman chief, but a leader with a different style.
Her style is one of participation, a concern, one of, well, how can we improve? How can we deal better with the public? How can we deal better with the legislature?
To the extent that people in this state are somewhat moderate, if they perceive the court as not being an activist court, I guess that's a plus. It certainly will be a plus in the legislature where the majority of those elected want a centrist type of court.
She will review the law and rule on the law rather than trying to move into a new law.
It's been a very forceful court. She may not want to go that way, and it's going to be interesting to see whether that's good or bad.
And though she's now been sitting for 7 months in the High Court's coveted center chair, it is still much too soon to predict what she'll do.
It's almost too early to say what can we expect to see out of the Poritz court.
I don't believe that she's going to bring all of the baggage of the governor or all of the other things with her, but I think that her background will, to a great degree, determine where she's going to go.
But it does seem clear that she'll go there her way. More consensus than confrontation, more low-key than high-profile, more of what she brought to her stint as Attorney General. Then, too, the first woman to hold that job in a way that's been described as strong but soft-spoken.
I was at many meetings where She participated and really controlled the meeting in a very authoritative way, but a very low-key and really a nice way.
And as AG, she left her mark on issues that ranged from juvenile justice.
The Commission would allow the juvenile justice system to speak with one voice
to car inspection,
so that we can go forward in a reasonable way and not have long waiting lines.
From bias crimes.
We have to teach kids what those symbols mean so they do understand that they're hurting someone.
To Megan's Law.
Megan's Law is a response to a concern for the most vulnerable members of our society, for their safety.
That argument made before the High Court while the late Wilentz was still in charge. Now she sits in that seat.
The high quality of the service to the people of New Jersey, the seriousness with which issues will be addressed, all those things. Everything that has made the New Jersey Supreme Court a model for the nation is going to continue under Chief Justice Poritz.
Deborah Poritz has all the makings of a Chief Justice of historical proportions. Her style is different, however. She is very open and available. She will serve with enormous public acclaim during her decade as the Chief Justice.
It is the kind of Poritz prediction you hear from legal scholars and lawyers and legislators here. The speculation tends to be she'll rock the boat less often than Wilentz, but those who know her say she'll bring a softer, gentler style to whatever she does. Simply a function of a female in the job? Well, that seems to be too easy an explanation. We know plenty of women in the bar and on the bench whose touch could be called anything but light. Yet gender is a part of the Poritz picture. She has said that she looks forward to a time when being a woman is no longer cause for note. But she also concedes we're not there yet.
And when we come back, Deborah Poritz herself on all of these questions of style and substance. It's a due process exclusive, your chance to hear from the court's new chief. So stay with us.
I'm delighted to see a woman as Chief Justice. I don't in any way pretend that I'm not. It's something that I've looked forward to in my lifetime. Is there any difference in the way justice will be administered or decided because she is a woman? Absolutely not. The law is the law, and what you derive from it cuts across sex, race, creed lines. She's a lawyer. She's a good lawyer. She's been a lawyer for 20 years now, and I have no reason to believe that justice will be in any way affected because she happens to be a lawyer who also accidentally is a woman.
She is also the person who'll be putting her stamp on every aspect of New Jersey's court and justice system into the next millennium. And she's with us now for this very special edition of Due Process. Chief Justice Poritz, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
I'm a pretty confident person. There aren't many things that I hold in awe, but certainly the office that you've embarked on is one that is awe-inspiring. As you've approached it for these first 9 months, has it been an awesome experience for you?
Yes, it has. You're right about the office. Whoever sits in this office has an enormous amount of responsibility, and that's daunting. I think that's daunting for anyone.
What aspect of your life do you think was most important in preparing you to do this?
I don't think I can point to any one thing. I've often said that although I came to the law late, my experience as an English teacher, my experience as a mother, other experiences in life, I think, are also important. I've very much enjoyed going to law school. I've enjoyed my career in the law. But whatever you bring to this office is an amalgam of all those things.
Now, it's interesting as we listen to the report, and I'm sure as you read the newspapers, to hear people endlessly predicting what you're going to do in the future. In terms of predictions, one of the things that often comes up is the fact that you've served as a legal advisor in many different ways to the governor and are associated with many of her policies. How do you move into the judicial position and move away from those other positions you've taken in the past?
Well, we've had a Chief Justice who was a governor. We certainly have had many people on the court, many fine jurists on the court who came from a political life. I think everyone who moves from the political branches of government, whether the legislature or the executive branch, knows that it's of primary importance that the judicial branch maintain its independence and its integrity. And the only way that can be done is if the judicial branch is separate from the political branches.
Has it been a special challenge for you because you were appointed by a governor with whom you had worked closely on evolving policies in the realm of the law for a long period of time, and now you have to make this break that maybe calls on almost superhuman powers?
Well, I don't think of it that way. I worked on a number of issues that I think are very important issues. The court hears cases that deal with issues that are very, very important. I said, half in jest to my colleagues, where are the easy cases? We get the difficult issues when they come to the Supreme Court. The challenge is there, whether you've been in politics or whatever has been the past of the individual. So I don't look at it as something unique or special. It's still a challenge, and there's still the need to be independent and to review whatever the issue is in an independent way and under the law.
One of the things that I've always wanted to ask a Chief Justice, I guess this is my chance, is something about the moral authority that's involved in the judging. If we look back on this century, it's very likely that from the point of view of the United States Supreme Court, the decision that will ring the loudest as we move into the next century is Brown versus the Board of Education, which was a decision that had some legal reasoning and some legal writing, but is well known really because of the kind of social and political and the moral effect it had. Do you see any comparable kind of decision or decisions in the past of our Supreme Court?
Our Supreme Court's made some major comparable decisions, decisions having to do with the right to die, decisions having to do with our schools. They are very important to the citizens of New Jersey. I think our court has tried always to decide these cases in a fair and impartial way. The role of the court as one of the branches in a tripartite system has to be to do that and to create that separate, independent look, but a look that is circumscribed by our history and our laws, our Constitution.
When those kinds of decisions are made by a court, it invokes one of the many buzzwords that surrounds this prediction business. Is it an activist court? That is it a court that gets close to the line of what separates the judicial branch from the legislature, or that raises questions about what a court should be doing? Do you think that's a label that can be fairly applied to past judicial administrations?
I have problems with labels, and an activist court or labels like that I don't think fairly describe what a court is about. Justice Coleman, when he came on the court, made a comment about legislation and a court trying to discern what the legislature was saying or trying to do. As an English teacher, I can tell you that the English language is often ambiguous, and the legislature at its best may produce legislation that is susceptible of many meanings. That's a task of the court, to try to determine what the legislature intended, and it's not always completely obvious from the legislation. The court may be required to make a determination, not in a vacuum, but where there is not a great deal of law to base the decision on, a great deal of precedent. We're moving so rapidly in so many areas of technology, for example, that new issues come before courts that perhaps we wouldn't even have thought of a decade ago, and there is no real precedent to turn to. So courts have to do what they can, trying to find appropriate analogies, looking to the law. That process I hate to describe as with a label, activist court or non-activist court. I think courts do that function as best they can.
But those labels do become part of the language that we talk about, we use when we talk about courts.
Yes.
I am a great admirer of the past Chief Justice, as I have heard that you are as well. But I think both his critics and those who sing his praises would say it was an activist court during his tenure, in part because when the time came, he was not afraid or shy to take positions that were either controversial or got close to the line where the legislative function is separated from the judicial function. Is that a tradition that you think is a part of the New Jersey court system, or do you think it may vary from time to time and from Chief Justice to Chief Justice?
I don't want to speak for others, but for myself, I hope I will have the courage when the time comes to make the calls that I think should be made based on my understanding of the law, and in those areas where it may be a close question, or where the legislative intent is not absolutely clear, or where there is not the kind of guiding principle that one would hope to find, I will do the best I can. And if that's activism, I hope I'll have the courage to stand by those decisions.
It's interesting because the process of prediction, and I'm sure probably you did it before you became Chief Justice, is to figure out where judges were going based on their past. But I guess one of the things we know from Chief Justice Warren of the United States Supreme Court and Justice Black and others is that sometimes those predictions go awry and in fact defy the very people who make the predictions. Is it likely that 10 years from now, when we're talking about the Poritz term on the court, that we'll be saying, gee, she surprised us in many ways?
I hope so.
Okay, well, that's positive. Let me ask you some questions that relate to your being the first woman Chief Justice. In some ways, I think I've heard you say that you accept the fact that you become a role model or a symbol, and that's an inevitable part of being the first woman. But in more profound ways, certainly, for example, I'm an African American, and I can't imagine making any political decision or judgment or having legal policy opinions that aren't in some way influenced by having been raised as an African American at a time when that had meaning. You've come up through the ranks at a time when being a woman meant many things, a lot of them negative, a lot of them special obstacles. That won't affect your judicial philosophy as it evolves, the fact that you've had to meet and learn and understand these obstacles?
Of course it will affect my judicial philosophy. It's part of what I am. As I mentioned earlier, all of the things that I have been in the past, a mother, that's certainly a female role. All of the things I've been and all of the things I've done will affect what I am today and how I approach my role. What I have said when I've talked about this publicly is that I look forward to the time when we have so many women in these roles, so many prior women Chief Justices or Attorneys General or whatever the particular role is, that we don't comment about it anymore. It's a part of our culture. We don't think about those differences. But when you look at each individual, he or she, African American, Indian, male, female, we're all a product of all of the things we are. So of course I am too.
So since we're not at that time when it doesn't matter yet that you're a woman in terms of public life or political life or the policy life of this community, can you predict any ways in which being a woman is likely to affect your tenure as Chief Justice?
That's a harder question. I mean, certainly, even recently, I was at a gathering and we were talking about our experiences and how they'd affected us. And I remember being the first woman attorney in the environmental section in the Attorney General's office. I remember representing New Jersey at the Delaware Basin Commission at a meeting in an all-male club in Philadelphia. And I remember meeting the first woman attorney from New York State there. Those kinds of experiences do affect every one of us, and I hope that those experiences will make me more sensitive to these kinds of concerns and the concerns of any group of people who have felt excluded and have been excluded at one point or another. But I also feel great concern about children, and there are many issues. So I would say, again, this is part of all of those experiences that make up the person that will approach these opinions.
Let me ask you another question that's really kind of bothered me a little bit insofar as it relates to your being both Chief Justice and a woman, and that is that you've been asked questions about your noodle pudding. Yes. Now, I can't imagine anybody asking Chief Justice Valence about a recipe for noodle pudding or anything else. Is that a function of people feeling that they can presume to approach you in ways that they wouldn't approach him based on gender, or just a difference in personality, that you're a person who might be more likely to have a recipe for noodle pudding?
I don't know. We have different personalities, and I don't know the source of that, and I don't think it's important. It does not bother me that people ask me for my recipes or whatever. That's part of what I am. One of the things that I do is cook, although I haven't very much lately, I must say. One of the things I used to do was cook. That's fine. There are lots of different things we do, and that's one of them for me. As far as being more or less approachable, that I think is a matter of personality and style.
I was going to ask you about that, because there are a few things that people in this state agree about when it comes to Chief Justices, but the unanimous opinion seems to be that you are more approachable. Is that a conscious matter of style, or is it just a reflection of how you are as a human being?
It's my personality. My interactions with a former Chief Justice were always warm and cordial, and I always found him to be a delightful person to talk to. But in public appearances, we probably have a very different style. We do. He did have a different style from what my style is today. And that's just what we are and what we have been.
This is an institution, you think, flexible enough to adapt to different styles from different Chief Justices?
It is adapting.
I
can tell you that.
Lots of our viewers are young people, and one of the things they may hear or read about from time to time is hear the expression that this position is one of the most powerful Chief Justice positions in all the states. What is meant by that? What are the responsibilities and the powers of our Chief Justice that are different from what exists in many other states?
The Chief Justice in this state is both the head of the court system, the administrator of the court system, and the chief of the court. And we have a unified court system now, especially now with state funding of the entire court system. So we have a very powerful court system and a very powerful Chief Justice that goes along with that. The court has the power from the 47 Constitution to establish all of the rules for its own operations, and the Chief Justice, as the head of that organization, is the key person, although certainly the court in fashioning court rules is very important as well. So for all of those reasons, the Chief Justice in this state is very powerful.
I know that from personal experience, one of the characteristics of the old chief was that if you criticized his position on a rule, you very often wound up on a committee trying to fashion a new one.
Yes.
That's true. When you accepted this position, you spoke about the legacy of the past and your desire to continue that legacy. What's the legacy of the past, and what do you think your role is going to be in extending it?
I think the Supreme Court in this state has a reputation that's well-deserved for being one of the premier state courts in the country. And it is my hope, my earnest hope, that the court will continue to deserve that reputation and to carry out its role in a way that deserves that reputation, certainly. That we started discussing this, and I said this is a daunting role. That goal is a daunting goal, but the other justices on the court are extraordinary men and women, and I have great confidence that the court will continue to be a premier state court.
I know you don't like labels, but 10 years from now, when someone is teaching a course on constitutional law in New Jersey, what one word would you like them to use in describing your tenure? What will have been your tenure at that point?
I don't think I can say what you want me to say in one word, but I can perhaps try a phrase that she called them, those calls that she had to make, as honestly and with as much integrity as she could bring to that job.
One last question I've got to ask you is that the late Chief Justice went 14 years into his term before he gave a television interview. Here in your first year, you've been kind enough to come and talk to us, but I assume that must stem from your sense of how the public at large should be able to interact with and know its Chief Justice. Why have you chosen to do it this early in your term?
Because I think it's important. We see on television today many trials. We hear a great deal about the courts. I think the public has a right to know about the courts, about the Chief Justice, about the way the courts function. I don't see that as in any way a threat or a problem as far as the independence and the integrity of the court system is concerned. In fact, I see it as something positive. I want the public to know about what we do and how important it is and to understand it, particularly when we have so much on television about what's going on and not a lot of education explaining what's really happening.
Well, it's certainly been an educational experience to have you here, and I hope for our viewers, and I hope we can get you back again next year.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming. And we'll be back next week with an issue that could find its way to the state Supreme Court. Needle exchange, next time on Due Process. Till then, I'm Raymond Brown.
I'm proud to be the first woman. I came to understand as Attorney General, as the first woman, as I know the governor has said this many times, that as the first, you become something of a role model.
It's not even an issue. It's no longer a question of how will she as a woman do A, B, C, or D.
You look forward to the day when there are so many women doing these kinds of jobs that it isn't an issue anymore.
Deborah Poritz has all the makings of a Chief Justice of historical proportions.
I will do my best to live up to the high standards of those who have come before me, to continue the work of those and to mark new paths, always with the goal of serving the citizens of this state through the finest judicial system in the country.